Welcome to the Psychedelic Integration Compass. I'm your host, Clara Parati. I specialize in psychospiritual integration and holistic well-being. In this podcast, we explore different tools and practices for expanding consciousness and integrating change through your psychedelic journeys and beyond. Today, we welcome Rita Hraiz, a teacher of ageless wisdom. In this episode, we'll be talking about blending different spiritual practices to support deeper healing and transformation. Welcome everyone to this episode of the Psychedelic Integration Compass. With me is Rita. Today, Rita is a teacher of ageless wisdom, and her practice blends Tibetan Buddhism, Shamanism, and Esoteric Psychology. Hi Rita, thank you for joining us today.
It's lovely to be here with you and your listeners. Hi.
So let's dive in straight away. I want to ask you, as I usually do at the beginning, a few questions about yourself. How did you embark on this journey into this world? And how did you come to blend all these different practices into what you do today?
Basically, in this time, as the deeper and the more we awaken, the more we, what gets to be flowered in terms of consciousness is all that we are. So, Clara, in reality, if I look at who I am as a person in this body, I came through a Lebanese Catholic mother and a Hindu father. So at about 11 years old, I realized I don't identify with being British and English. I don't identify with being Hindu, and I didn't identify with being Christian in that moment, because it didn't mean that I don't love the Hindu part of my bloodline and the richness of the Vedic pantheon. And I completely respect and have deepest reverence for Krishna. It's not like I don't believe that Krishna exists. Of course, Krishna exists. Same way I see the Christ exists. But at 11 years old, I found this book on the library shelf at my Catholic school called The Third Eye by Lobsang Ramsa, which is actually not even a book based on truth, but it activated a memory of knowing I had been a Tibetan Buddhist monk and nun. And that went so deep. And the rest of my life became a series of unfoldings to then become deeply realized in previous life trainings, many of which has been what's called the Vajra Kagyu lineage, which is a high tantric path based on cutting through illusion. And that all, Clara, led to a full-on kundalini awakening when in 1994 to 1996. And yeah, it was a massive, deep, full-on, blissful, incredible, profound transformation, which has shaped my life way beyond a plan that comes from my ego or mind.
So that's it, like this journey started with a deep remembering.
At age 4, actually, one day at age 4, I was, we lived in Ealing in London, and I wanted to go and play with a friend. And I had an ice lolly. And the lady, when I knocked 2 doors down to play, they said, "You can't come in with the ice lolly because the children are going to want one. Can you wait outside till you finish it?" I was waiting outside, eating this ice lolly, and then noticed the chi, the prana, the life force energy under my feet. I felt like I was standing on like a vortex of electromagnetic cushion. And I stood and I knew that if I was deeply still within myself, I could stand on that electromagnetic cushion. And I felt myself levitate on it, like 4 inches above the ground. So it was very aware of energy from a very young age, vortexes, a etheric field. Yeah, yeah. It was started right at the beginning.
Sounds incredible. And so it makes me curious to know, as that progressed in your life, as you became a teenager, was there a kind of like defining point where you're like, okay, this is, my life path, this is what the kind of work that I want to do within myself and other people? Did you know from that young age? Or was there a kind of like a turning point that made it so that it was clear, totally clear to you that that was it? It was the path that you were going to walk in your life?
Basically, even though I was massively spiritual and always studying, like when I was at school, I would study deeply the Bible because I couldn't believe, because that was my favorite subject, religion and theology. And I couldn't quite believe that the Catholic way of seeing things of it's only one life, there's not reincarnation. If you don't believe in Jesus, you don't go into heaven. When I had a grandmother that was Hindu. So I thought best I study for myself. And I did and got A grades in my exams for these studies and like my O level and all of that. But so even when I had that, and even in my teens, thankfully, I'm so grateful for the whole Rasta movement of reggae, because that actually gave me something that felt I could have an identification or an energy that's conscious music that was shamanic and moved me and took me deeper in my praise of the creator. So that was going on. But for sure, in my 20s, I was in glamour. I was a clothes designer. My clothes were in Vogue and Look Now magazine. I was often asked to be on like the Jonathan Ross show and all these breakfast TV shows as a stylist of my clothing and all the rest of it. I was earning £100 an hour doing astrology in my early 20s. I don't think I was certainly not awake. And I then fell in love with a guy that became a drug addict. So I went into this falling and feeling out of alignment with myself in my 20s. I became a single parent and I didn't feel the spacious, clear light of bliss and my connection open through my crown chakra at that time at all. And I was, as a psychic once told me in my early 20s, going up the wrong ladder. And I was shaken off. And actually, in my maybe, well, it was around 92, 93. It was 94 when I came to Glastonbury. And that was like taking a spiritual sabbatical, stopping everything, letting go of everything, getting rid of all my old black clothing, just getting rid of all the clutter of my old world, old life. And I came to Glastonbury and really with the beginning of a study of ageless wisdom and understanding the law of harmlessness and deeply in a deep study and not allowing myself any of the old patterns of being brought into a conversation that was based on gossip or anything. I cut away my old life, literally. I became quite austere. I'd get up at 4 a.m, meditate in a pyramid, and really just emptied myself from the inside, really cleaned up, went into practicing humility and seeing what could I give rather than what could I take. And then a massive awakening began, which, when an awakening begins and the soul starts to come in, it's showing you completely the shadow. So I really am so grateful because the last 31 years has been the purification of the shadows that we inherit by having a physical body that come through the bloodlines and through the marketing and just being living in this world that has light and dark within duality. So it wasn't really until so I had this big Kundalini awakening between 94 to 96, but I was still not living a life that was based on service and consciousness. You know, I had a cake business that's generating, giving people sugar, for instance, and it was great fun. It was massively creative, but it wasn't my highest expression of service. And in 2003, I drank ayahuasca for the first time. And that was an incredible wake up on another level, because in that moment, I was just like really told by this great mother wisdom, your Dharma is definitely not giving people sugar. It was like, don't even think that. And so I went, you know, really worked deeply with plant medicines for a few years, where I went on another level of purification to really start to anchor in the laws of harmlessness, the embodiment. So although in 94 to 96, you know, I would be in these full bliss states, experiencing naturally, you know, hundreds of thousands of volts of electric fire coming through my crown chakra, opening me into these exquisite mudras, touching planets, like vast amounts of energy. You know, just, you definitely don't need any plant medicines or drugs to experience this vast connection to the source of creation, to the all. And what I see now, if I look back on all these years, these last 30 something years, it's from that initial Kundalini awakening and the recapitulation of many lifetimes of training shamanically and as a yogini with big practices, you know, deep practices that now are ripened so that I can completely be in service 360 degrees of every day of my life, every moment of my life is in that. You know, there's nothing separate from the outer expression of everything that came before in service.
So many things there, you know, to kind of reflect back, and we'll be talking about ageless wisdom and purifications and the teachings in a moment. But I just wanted to point out, listening to your story, how sometimes it really does take a few steps to get back into alignment, so that this alignment that you had, you know, although even as a child you had such a connection,
yeah,
then as you said in your 20s and then with what you were doing, sometimes it does take that this alignment to get back into alignment to get there. And I love that you kind of shared all that in such beautiful words as well, in so much depth. And I'm going to go to your teachings now, and you mentioned ageless wisdom and purification. Let's get more into that, and we can then connect it back to integration as well. I'd like to know what ageless wisdom means to you and how you can see that it can support the integration process with certain medicines, but also just in general for someone's healing and transformation.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess what I really love about the ageless wisdom and esoteric psychology, which isn't even presenting itself as a path to be followed, but it's so comprehensive. What I see is, through this study, something happens within that takes away the separation. So bottom line, what is ageless wisdom? To me, it's looking at all the paths that lead you back to the center. So whether that is the Sufi Islamic path, whether it's the Christian way of seeing, like the emanation. So basically, there's the source of creation and many emanations of mastery that came from the source, and each came to lead a group of people into a certain level of development of humanity. So if we're talking about through the Hindu path and Krishna, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, and all their consorts, that is one whole path within ageless wisdom to understand. And then within that, it's not superficial, it's understanding the planes of consciousness, the atomic plane, etc. So understanding, how does kundalini rise? What is the relationship of the great mother Shakti in relationship to the masculine divine aspect, and all the different emanations of that? That in itself is vast. Then when you take the Christian path and you look at the incarnation of the Christ as Jesus, and what do these teachings mean in the Bible? It's all part of ageless wisdom and his whole journey to take humanity to purify the emotional body. When he asked John the Baptist to baptize him in the waters, that symbolized the entire Pisces age. The age of Pisces was how to discern, discriminate, how to clear the emotional body, how to come into compassion through your heart, how to develop yourself, to empty yourself, to feel the love and wisdom coming from the source of creation, the Christ consciousness through your very being, and how to stop taking everything personally and be in this separative blame energy, which is where we are when we're lost and unawake. So ageless wisdom, and of course it includes within it, a very high teaching of the Buddhist path. The Buddhist path is, there's 84,000 teachings that Buddhist Shakyamuni brought in 2,500 years ago that are so comprehensive, and it's based on helping people to develop to the point that their brow center is open, as is the Christ teachings in Revelations, all about the brow center being open. So they all try to bring you to the same point of the brow center open. And the way that Buddhism does it is through the purification of the mind, through understanding that everything that's showing up in your life comes from your thoughts. Everything. There cannot be blame. You've just got to understand whatever arises from your thoughts. And if you want to change anything, you have to cut the root of the mind or develop what's called pure view, to be able to witness the good, the true, and the beautiful, instead of feeling somebody's impurity and then going, I can't stand that. It's triggering something in me. And then you don't look at, well, what is it in you that's being triggered by this? And so within Buddhism, it's such a beautiful path, because it shows you how to invoke those that have gone before you, who've come to the Buddhaic mastery of coming home to themselves. And through the power of mantra, which creates a geometry and opens a field of light, you can chant for others then who are suffering. And then within ageless wisdom, if you look at the indigenous paths, and this is how it dovetails into plant medicines, for instance, the very master plant teachers, they are also in service to the Buddha, the Christ, and these great rishis from the Hindu pantheon. They're not separate from it. Everything in consciousness is all about helping us to internally purify so that we can come home to experience our primordial wisdom nature that is innate, stainless purity and eternal. That is who we are as beings. We are the light of spirit, made of cosmic fire, at one with the one. We're not separate, but it takes a lot to build the bridge to come home to ourselves, to get clear the imprints that you've received through your DNA from the suffering of your mother, father, grandmothers, grandfathers, all the way back. Not to mention what you've brought in with you as a soul from maybe your last life. You were, killed in a very horrible way. Anything's possible. And you've got traumas that you're not sure what's going on. And then, so coming back actually to the plant medicines, that in the past, when life was at a slower pace and survival was not as intense as it is now, to pay the bills, to pay the mortgage, to pay the rent, to buy food, like all over the world, just that is a whole process for everybody on a daily basis. And life is very fast, even to get that time to sit in stillness, to watch the mind, to what is called meditation, just to become aware of what you're thinking and where you are, and attempting to get that clear light, that spaciousness, that connection to the spirit, takes so much discipline to even get to the point where you can include that in your life. And is almost like a luxury to have that spare half an hour where you're not in something, not to mention then the darker energies that are keeping humanity consciously distracted, scrolling outside of ourselves. If we were to go back to the Bible and the Tower of Babylon and understand, how humanity originally fell in that pathway to look at it, the fall from the grace from the Garden of Eden was because we were seeking the tree of knowledge rather than opening to the tree of life. The tree of life that sits within is the nervous system, grounded into the earth and open to the sky. Just imagine that. So everything right now is like the nervous systems of most people are fried. They've got Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and God knows which things the young people are doing as well. And it's all this scroll distraction, not sitting in the stillness to come and really observe. So ageless wisdom ultimately helps us to understand that humanity itself is in a stage of evolution as a collective, then we're individually in spiritual evolution. And the spiritual evolution is 3 stages of initiation to get to the point that we've returned to be at one with the Father's will. Like literally in every religious pathway, it all comes back to aligning with the source of creation. There's 3 stages of that. And the first, believe it or not, is the training ourselves to be aware that there is an imprint inside each of us that is scathingly judgmental, comparing itself, seeing the darkness outside of itself and judging. But actually, when it really comes down to it, it's our own self-judgment within ourselves, of ourselves, and the places we don't love ourselves. And until we can actually choose to not speak something that's harmful and unkind about another person or to another person, our throat chakra will go anti-clockwise because it's related to the throat. And when the throat chakra is going anti-clockwise in an unawakened person, it pushes onto the sacral chakra because they are aligned. And the sacral chakra is what holds all your creative, prosperous energy. The fountain of creativity is here. But when your sacral chakra is being pushed by the throat center and it goes anti-clockwise, it's focused on the sensual sensation of needing to get something outside of itself. So it focuses on materialism. And I need this, I need this, I need this. And then you've got the whole marketing machine saying, you're not enough. You need this cream, you need these lips, you need this new pair of shoes, you need this for your kitchen, this. And so then it's like focused on something. You keep needing to get something outside of you because you never feel you're complete. And that goes for sexuality because it's the sacral center. And then people are like always not feeling gratified. And in this chasing of this orgasm that becomes further and further away until there's debauchery, pornography, and then at the worst, lowest, darkest place in humanity, where it's so devoid of connection to self that it's now looking to violate somebody else and take their innocence, their beauty, their connection to God. And that's why we've got children all over this world unsafe and have done for a long time. And so the wake up of humanity, so Ageless Wisdom is based on the wake up of humanity. The plant medicines are in service to the wake up of humanity. It's all the same thing. And this wake up comes from the very first stage is becoming aware of these judgmental conditioned imprints and then taking a practice of harmlessness. Chanting mantra is very helpful at this stage because it opens a new field of energy. It distracts the mind from being in the negative and it starts a purification process. And it starts to draw up your sexual energy. And when your sexual energy comes up through the central channel, through the heart to the throat, then it's blessed through the heart. And something shifts and cleans. And then you have more vitality, more inspiration, more creativity, more intuition. So that's the first stage of waking up for humanity. And basically, Ageless Wisdom is all about understanding the wake up. Where are you in your wake up process? Where are your family? Are you in right relationship to yourself with your sexual energy? Are you in flirting to get your needs met to feel important? Or are you in a place where you do not need to misuse your own sexual energy and you respect it and you understand it's sacred and precious? So that's the first stage of wake up. And just very briefly, because I know I'm like really intensely downloading this to give your viewers the maximum understanding. But the second stage is the coming into discernment, discrimination, and getting off the emotional treadmill so that you're no longer in the control drama of self-pity or aloofness or intimidation or anything else that vampires and takes energy. So to get off that emotional treadmill, to stop being irritated, agitated by somebody else, to stop being angry with situations, that takes a lot of inner discipline. It takes everything that the Christ, the Buddha, Krishna, all the great masters and the feminine counterparts also teach, which is to develop the capacity to put ourselves in another person's shoes, to go beyond the wound of another person, and to have compassion and to have connection to your soul and spirit to be able to radiate loving wisdom, warmth, and generosity to another.
Another, yeah, because it's the quality of the discernment as well. So if the discernment doesn't have the compassion that comes with it, it becomes judgment and it brings you back to the first stage, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, because in psychosynthesis, which is something that I use as well for integration, it has an Eastern spin. So there's something that we call the loving observer, going back to the loving observer and working with different parts of the self, which is similar to the shadow work that you do in shamanism and what you just mentioned, kind of bringing as well that quality, understanding the judgment, understanding that it's your self-judgment that kicks in.
Exactly.
And, I wanted just to mention a couple of things and then we carry on with, what you were saying, but that came to me about ageless wisdom, really, really important, like you were saying, that, we are working through intergenerational trauma that came in and past lives. And it's not even just about your lineage, it's about the other lives that you lived in other lineages. But as you said, you know, when you mentioned about mantra and connecting to the teachers of the past, as much as we inherit the trauma, we inherit the light as well, and we can tap back into that. There are so many tools that can be used to connect back, not just with what are here to evolve from and transmute, but also the beautiful wisdom, ageless wisdom that has come through the ages and through the past. And as you said, it's a very all-encompassing practice. Yours is about all the beautiful kind of teachings that came.
Yeah, it's so beautiful because it encompasses all. And then just going into like the highest Buddhist path, it's called Mahamudra, you know, which leads you to the Dharmakaya. I run something called Dharmakaya Retreats because the Dharmakaya is your innate, stainless purity, spacious, clear light, where you recognize that this is a dream. This is one night's dreaming in our soul's evolution. All the paths actually bring us back to that understanding. You know, the Marikames from Wirikuta, the indigenous aboriginals, the Hindus and the Buddhists, they all understand that this is a dream state. And we are here awakening within the dream. And once we do that, then our power is back, the power to serve in the light. Then something else manifests, the recognizing that, you know, because also this is very deep within ageless wisdom, the understanding that there is a divine plan that's working out. The third stage of a wake up is when the brow center is open. That takes us into revelation, takes us into a very humble place. It's very different to have our lives led by our ego. When we're at the point where the brow center is open, we are in a stillness that's listening to the instruction that comes through the silence of the presence of the one through our heart center. And that stillness and silence presents us the exact knowing what to do and how to be in the highest level of service in every moment, every day, in every way. We're out of the way of ourselves. We become hollow as a flute, as would be discussed in shamanism, hollow bone, which then brings us into the Tao. So all the paths, everything is just brought back to this non-dualistic understanding. And this is how the awakening, which brings us into the golden age, is going to happen. When all over this earth, people are coming into this awakening, and it's unstoppable, Clara. I've been in this observance for 21 years now, since I first drank ayahuasca, of just seeing all over the world, people are coming into an awakening where their crown chakra is now connected back to the Father of all creation. Their base chakra is opened and connected to the Great Mother. We're plugged in. We're plugged in. And in that being plugged in, there's no more it being about what can I get? It's what can I give? And that in itself changes everything on this earth.
I was just thinking about quite a few things that you just mentioned, and I've really kind of, what makes me think suddenly there's an awakening that's happening on a kind of planetary level, and everything that you've been talking about so far really involves like a really deep self-inquiry. So I'm wondering what you think. This is something completely that just came to me. We talked about being in really strong disalignment as a waking up call, but I wonder, in your opinion, what do you think that is kind of supporting people in going into that self-inquiry, looking at the world today and what's happening? And I don't want to get political, but just thinking about the state of the world these days, do you think there is something that comes from collective consciousness that's spiraling in?
You know, it's a very important question. one of the things I realize is if we look at the overall and we understand that our creator gave us free will, and that free will is everything on some level, that people have to be in the place where they're ready to want to connect from spirit. And normally that comes from a healing crisis. Like for me, it was crisis. I felt so like I've fallen into the dark. And that moment I said, Creator Spirit, please hold my hand, pull me out, please. And immediately a teacher came, the ageless wisdom came, everything came, because I had the humility to ask and recognize I can't do it by myself. Again, just jumping back to plant medicines, because there's such deep distrust of the guru. The last 2000 years, think about this. It's so sad. And so what it is, it's not even sad really. But basically, you can see so many gurus and teachers fell. They didn't walk their talk and they abused their power in every echelon of society all over the world, including within the plant medicine world and the shaman sitting behind the altar. Massive disconnections all over the place. So of course, this whole thing of the discernment discrimination is massive. But ultimately, there comes a moment, because it's taken us hundreds of lives to get to this point as human beings. There's a book called The Solar Angel. Very good book for people to read to understand how long ago it was when the mental body of humanity was beginning to be developed. And each human being's appointed a solar guardian called a solar angel that has walked with them for all their lives and understands exactly where they are, but stands again as this silent observer that is watching, the silent witness that's watching. They're not allowed to interrupt and interfere with a person's development. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun, because we have to do it for ourselves. You know, even if one goes to a plant medicine ceremony, at the end of the day, the homework is now you see yourself, you've got to clean up. You've got to go and forgive that person, do this, do that, clean your house, make sure that your things are in order within you and outside of you, for you to come into harmony in your life. Because actually it's all about coming into harmony with your relationships, with your partner, with your parents, with your children. Then we radiate the light of peace, because we are in training to become the peacekeepers of this earth. And that should be and must be our biggest priority. So for most humans, to answer your question a bit more directly, I'm sorry, I am very esoteric, so it's always a picture. For most humans, they get to the point, like myself, like everyone, saying, I am sick of being self-absorbed and selfish. I am lost. I need to come in to open myself to the light that exists. Now, these days, there's a lot more on every channel that you look at about this awakening. So there's inspiration. And what's happening, what I'm witnessing around the world, is people will see another person suddenly stop being all negative, harmful, and radiating a jaggedy, horrible auric field, and they suddenly look clean and pure, and they've been doing Cambo, some plant medicine somewhere, and this massive transformation. And then their family notice and say, wait, what happened? You know, and then somebody else goes in and, you know, like, this is what's actually happening all over the earth. So, but on the individual level, people go, I know that I'm in such a mess. I need to transform myself. That is when we return. That's, again, very similar to the prodigal son parable. When you're returning and you're just saying, can't do this on my own. Please let me back in. Please hold my hand. Please help me. That is the turning point. You know, think about, I've never been to AA. I've not been in this lifetime, thankfully, not in addiction, but I am around a lot of addiction. I've seen it. But the whole AA principle is based on that, coming back to ask this higher power for assistance and help. That has to be the starting point to begin the self-reflection journey. But the ego is clever. It will do everything to have control. And the third initiation is when it's fully subjugated. But it's not subjugated as in suppressed. It becomes the beautiful vessel for your soul to shine through. Now, I've used the word spirit and I've used the word soul, and they are two different things. So ageless wisdom really helps to examine everything. So it's not some new age concept. It's based on real reality. And so the soul is different to the spirit. The spirit is your innate highest point of consciousness, where you're at one with the one, and that is immutable. It cannot ever be destroyed. Your soul is that you've cultivated through all your lifetimes, through your good deeds, words, and actions, your selfless service, your offerings to the sacred waters, your prayers, your mantras. That builds the light of your soul, and it resides in a different place to your spirit. So your soul is always, after you leave your body, this beautiful garment, and all the merit that you've accumulated is stored in your chakras and in your meridian system and in your minor chakras and in your nadis. And at the end of this life, that's the only thing you take with you. The absorption of the merit, the electric fire that goes into the soul, continuing to build the light of your soul, which then resides in what's called the causal ocean, the plane of electric fire. So coming back to what is ageless wisdom is a way of understanding our spiritual evolution, is that there comes a point, and this is the first time in humanity so many people are at this point, where we are invoking the light of the soul, invoking the light of the merit of all that we are, to be the one in charge, to come down and in and radiate out as a radiant fire of wisdom and love and light that knows how to nurture, how to bring grace, how to walk the beauty way.
I'd like to ask you more about this relationship between the soul and spirit.
Oh yeah, the difference.
Deeper into the teachings, just in general as a concept for people that might not be, maybe haven't explored that kind of differentiation yet, and that relationship, because I'm guessing all this work that we've been talking about is very much about connecting the two very deeply. So that there is a cooperation, nothing is separate, as we were saying. So can you tell me a little bit more about the relationship between the two? Because I'm just asking for listeners that might be a bit confused about it, and they might think now that there are two separate things, because now for years, how do they work together? How do we, through ageless wisdom, plantmedicine integration, Tibetan Buddhism, different disciplines, what is that journey of bringing them closer and having them working well together so that we can channel source, I'm guessing when I think about spirit, and then express it in our own unique way in this lifetime?
There is a bridge that gets built, and it's not you can't plan it and I can't plan it. It's not a left brain mind thing. It's like an accumulation of merit through your harmlessness and through your inner work. And basically, this is very deeply related to the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, and the carotid glands that are in the back of the head here. They form a triad that's your Godhead. And when there's enough light connecting from each of them, radiating through the purity of your goodness, through your selfless service, through your choice to not keep going into condemning somebody else and being harmful. So that radiates this light. And when the time is right, when it's like a fruit growing on a tree or a pregnancy. There's no plan to it. When it's ripe, it's ripe. It's that ripe moment. You can't force it. And no, this is really important. No plant medicine can force it. No guru can do anything. It's an internal thing between you and the creator. And then, so let's try and put it a different way. Your body has to be able to hold the voltage of the cosmic fire of your spirit. If it came in too quick, you would go into a psychosis. You wouldn't be able to handle seeing the dark night of the soul and the impurity, and there'll be a lot of confusion because it's a massive amplification of energy. So it's very related. So the whole process is related to what a kundalini awakening is. My life is dedicated to teach this because this is happening all over the world. And if you don't understand what's going on in you, the different stages of your awakening, then you can be frightened of the great Shakti Ma coming to clean all your cells and turn you inside out and to this enormous, to be able to hold the enormous voltage of energy of your spirit coming in. So, you probably seen when you've gone to an ayahuasca ceremony, like some people lying there shaking all night and they are feeling that they're being electrified because all this energy is coming in, but it was meant to be. Because unlike taking drugs, let's talk about the difference between the two. Drugs like MDMA and all those drugs that were designed initially for therapy, but actually got misused and can catalyze like a whole load of kundalini to be released, but it's like it's a synthetic release that's not based on the wisdom of the plant, master plant intelligence that has scanned your body and understands if it's safe for this energy to be activated and released. Are you harmless enough to be able to hold the voltage of the light of your spirit to come down and in? Because basically, as you progress through the different initiations, eventually your crown chakra opens. The highest bliss, the hundreds of thousands of volts of fire coming from the light of your spirit will travel unimpeded all the way down to the base of your spine. And then the great sleeping serpent is arisen. And that sleeping serpent, when it arises, it splits between the left and right channel, the Ida Pingala, masculine, feminine, divine, masculine, feminine, opens and crosses at all the chakras until it gets to the crown of the head. So it's a marriage. So this is what is attempted to be hinted at in the Bible, the sacred marriage of the Christ and the bride. But we become the acupuncture point for this holy thing because we've come into our wholeness of holiness. So it's not left brain. In my Ageless Wisdom Shamanic training, over the course of 12 months, I take people very deeply into their own. I'm holding a container for people to come into their self-exploration as they study and understand this, so that, this becomes embodied. It's not some sort of new agey, wishy-washy misunderstanding thing, because right now there's not really much teachings on this, especially in the world of like all this awakening. But there are people like Sadhguru and Muji, and there's many people there that are holding containers for people to do this inner work and take them into a certain way, as are the Vajra masters, you know, from the highest Buddhist perspective. There really are, but they are one path. And that's good, because one path is very direct. But I feel that there's so many people on the earth that just would not see themselves going to a guru or a lineage teacher in that way. And for some reason, Spirit has very strongly guided me, but I will never present myself as the teacher to be followed. I see myself actually as a student holding a container for people to study with me.
I love what you said about as well, like talking about the difference between different kind of medicines and substances, and again, the ageless wisdom of the plants, that they scan and they see what are you ready, what are you ready to receive? You know, how much of that voltage from spirit are you ready to receive? How much shadow are you able to hold in the moment?
Yes.
Of that, of yourself in that way, can you work through
absolutely
as well? You know,
that's so important, Clara, what you just said, because, you know, one of my biggest pains, I think, on being here is seeing the amounts of suicide on the earth and the vulnerability of our young people and the people that just don't feel that they can go through that door of seeing and allowing themselves to work with the shadow and go through, because they don't feel hopeful. They don't know the way through. Such a big responsibility on the earth at this moment, because often for people, in terms of, you will know this through integration, there's a lot of people that when they have had such a lot of light come in, that then they're saying, I just feel like I just want to lie down and die. You know, I don't want to live anymore because it's too much work to go through this density.
It is. And that's what can happen, basically, that people just get really ungrounded because they've received so much light. And that's what integration really helps kind of ground back and really support people on bringing that light into their lives. You know, it doesn't have to be to the same intensity. It doesn't have to be the same, because it can't be. But it's about really, again, bridging the two. And I can think about, you know, even my own experience with working with a particular medicine that's in one of the strongest medicines on earth. And it was the very beginning of my experience with, you know, the medicines, the sacred medicines. And the first time I did it, it was very intense. It kind of really quite scared me. And then I was like, oh my God, this connecting me to so much light. And this is personal experience. I started doing it quite a lot. And I'm not talking about ayahuasca, I'm talking about the strongest, right?
Okay.
And then once, I remember after a few times that I did it, as I was coming back, I could sense that I didn't want to come back.
Yeah.
And I was coughing my way back. And then I was like, as soon as I came back, I was like, okay, this is the last time I do this medicine for a while. Because I was preferring being out there than coming back here. And I'm actually taking these medicines for the opposite, to be fully embodied. There's a reason why I've incarnated, right? There's a reason why I chose to be here. And it took so many miracles for me to be here. And, you know, I realized I started doing with that medicine what I was doing maybe with sugar or with other things, you know, to just numbing out. I was like, no, I'm meant to be in this freaky world with all the shadow of it as well as the light.
I really hear that, Clara, and I feel that you should name the medicine, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I personally not ever had that feeling with that, because you know, I've seen in my life crack addicts, for instance, okay, and, you know, with this medicine that doesn't have an altar, it is very strong, it has its place, but it also really scares me when I see people that do this regularly, because it's no joke.
And it's both for various, we can mention.
And that what really worries me, to be honest, and that's a whole subject in itself, is just how many people after they've had it, especially if they've actually, because it has healed crack addiction. I've watched that. I've seen people that I've known that thankfully have gone to a Bufo thing, and then they actually have really not gone back to Bufo, not gone back to crack for so long, let's say. And so, of course, I'm always grateful to know that that's available to people that come to me and say, how can I heal addiction? I'll say, maybe you should go and do this. Don't get me wrong. But then I just see people that are like, I think I'm going to serve this. And they've got no understanding of the planes of consciousness, what this all is. They don't understand. And in some way, and I'm glad you brought it up, because that has, in these last couple of years, in fact, since 2021, I realized, look, I really have a very deep understanding of the different dimensions of consciousness, the bardos. I'm trained in understanding dying consciously, for instance. I feel a responsibility where there's all these people holding space around the world in different situations, different things. I feel like I need to be able to articulate and really help people understand responsibility of holding space, holding containers for other people, whether it's from a cacao ceremony or all the way up to serving bufo or mushrooms, whatever.
Yeah.
I really feel as a grandmother, I want to deeply share massive wisdom so that people can understand. If they've got somebody having a kundalini experience, I've been to like a ceremony where I'm seeing that somebody's treating that person who's having a kundalini experience and thinking that they're possessed and projecting onto them that they're possessed. So if there's no understanding, there's a lot of projection or misunderstanding. And now these things, I think, as an elder, I feel a responsibility to educate about this.
Yeah, it's really good that you mentioned all this, and especially with bufo, not only needs to be served properly, but I think that there needs to be a preparation. Talking about integration, you need a real preparation for it, and it takes a long time to integrate it afterwards. Repeatedly taking it, because it does, as you said, projects you into such different planes of consciousness that also a bit of shamanic kind of integration is really important, because what are you bringing back?
Exactly.
What are you bringing back when you are so open and have this beyond the body experience, right? Which can be very useful for letting go of control, breaking patterns of addiction. As you said, they all come with this really strong identification with the ego, which with that medicine, it's just, you're out of it. You're out of your ego, whether you like it or not, for a little bit of time. So I guess that's why it's so useful for certain things. But then to integrate it, and it's not just a matter of like integration on a personal level, it's a matter of integration as well on a really kind of shamanic level. What energies are you bringing back? So it's all.
I super agree with you. And look, let me put it into perspective. Let's just say, with this last 2,000-year period, that you would have had the Buddha's teachings or the Hindu ways that the yogis would have gone into a cave for 3 months doing darkness practice with a mantra, and often the guardianship of their lineage and the guru, somebody to bring them food, and then they go down and deep and within to release this amount of DMT naturally through their practice. But they've got the mantra creating the geometry around them that is a safe place to journey through. And they would go into these very high trance states naturally in this way. So that is my lineage beyond this life. So I naturally go into these. And I have that protection of this level of geometry, which is why I feel like how important it is in terms of integration and preparation to you know, and this isn't always understood. Let's just say, you know, the Shipibo, they have very strong, precise song lines and geometry that hold people safe in their journey and their traveling. It is a science what they do in the Amazon with ayahuasca.
The technology.
It's a technology. And you know, that is like the equivalent, if you like, to the Buddhist way to work naturally. But what we're talking about here, in some way, that the conversation went on, is that now there's, you know, ceremonial activity all over the earth, and there's often not clear, clean containers on any level, which is why you've taken a practice to help people integrate, you know, because it's so essential to understand what the sacred is and what is held with impeccability and clear energy. I really am glad that we've touched on this. Thank you.
And I'm so glad for this conversation. I'm becoming aware of time as well. Yeah. So we could carry on talking forever, but I want to bring it back to you and just, you know, ask you, you know, about your work, how you see it developing into the future, and what offerings do you have at the moment?
Well, thank you so much. Well, I do one-to-one wisdom counselling for people that really seems to help, and I love to do that. If anybody ever wants to have one-to-one deep session, to have a look at where you are and what tools you've come in with, and to take people on a journey, naturally, to start to explore what's going on inside you. I love doing couples work, Clara. That's a passion, because I see how that affects the children of the next 7 generations when I can help a couple harmonize and go beyond their projections and disharmony or attachments, like just to go into sacred union, understand how to transmit energy and hold each other in the highest light. I really love that work. So that's a big part of my work, and I will continue that. I am now opening to do a series of very beautiful shamanic transformational work with people in retreats that are, it's just very profound and beautiful. I'll be putting some more availability up for people to connect with me about that. I do work with women as well. But one of the things that I'm really excited about is I have an advanced shamanic space holders training in Spain. It's a week-long one where, you know, if you're somebody who would love to have confidence in your capacity to hold space, whether that's on a one-to-one level or within a group, please don't get me wrong, it's not, I'm not teaching people to give ayahuasca ceremonies or something like that. It's about the ability to hold space, to really understand another person, and how to give different modalities of healing, how we pray, for instance, with sacred tobacco in the Native American way. We're going to work with dispatcho, all different things. It's very profound in terms of just, I feel like I'm ready to download everything I understand over the course of a week for people to take that back into their work with people. So I realized that this word space holding has come about recently in these last few years. And when somebody in your life is about to leave their body, because recently my mother died, and I've been graced, I held space for when my partner was dying from a road traffic accident, when my baby was 5 months, our child. And just to be able to hold that space when someone's transiting and understand how to assist them in their journey over is a very shamanic practice. So again, this is something that I think everybody can learn from. It's the same as holding space for when a baby is coming in, that level of impeccability. Life is a journey of space holding. But so because people are in such deep distraction, so often when two people are even talking, they're not even listening. One's thinking about what they're going to say to the other. So then that's a lack of presence. So the whole space holding training is about opening to the presence, feeling that presence embodied and transmitting that presence, which means we're getting out of the way of ourself, which is how a divine plan can unfold through us, because our left brain mind really doesn't know best. Bottom line.
How can people find you, Rita?
So you put it as a link. It's my website. My name's Rita Hraiz, by the way, with Hraiz. And my website, ritahraiz.com. And then I'm on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, and TikTok these days a little bit.
I'm so grateful that you came, that you kind of blessed us with your presence and ageless wisdom, and you kind of really talked in depth about so many different things. Thank you, Rita.
Absolute pleasure, Clara. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share what's in my heart. Bless you.
Thank you again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining us today on the Psychedelic Integration Compass. If you enjoyed the episode, remember to like the video and subscribe to the newsletter to stay updated on what's coming next. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.